figured it worthwhile to give you a little backstory on some of the things you're going to want to check out on the 164. In the trunk I've got, these are the mud flaps that I bought and then never installed. These are rear mud flaps, so they're brand new. I've also got a little bag here with there's a transmission seal, there's a rear seal, there's a front main. I don't think the front main's leaking. It looks like a pan gasket, which incidentally they sent me the wrong one a couple times now. So I've got a pan gasket coming to you, so that'll be delivered to you. I've also got some other spare parts in here, some relays, there's some fuses and such. So that's in the bag in the back. There's the kick panels underneath the dash. Those get inserted back in there. I've actually never had them in there. So that's the deal there. Kind of the big things, but as you're noticing in the car, and this is, I received the car from, or purchased the car from a guy who lived down near Lake Geneva. He bought it from a sheriff's sale. It was an abandoned vehicle auction, and you can see the mileage is just about 58,000. It was an abandoned vehicle through the sheriff's sale, and a lot of it was, when I went to look at the car, a lot of the interior was pulled out of it. The guy was going to do like an SCCA race or racing with it, and then decided against that. I guess he picked up another car. So when I bought it, it was kind of in pieces here, so I had to put the dash cluster back together, and as I see, all the interior door panels were pulled out of it. But from what I understand, and the title that I had showed the actual mileage as whatever, 50, at that time 51,000. So it's got electric windows up front. These two switches here that are unlabeled, if you're wondering what the hell those are, that's your driver's window and your passenger window. The one funky thing, since it was I'm guessing, since it was a sheriff's sale, the original key lock was drilled out, and when I got it, this kind of generic key was down here, so that is the ignition key. This was empty. I ended up putting a plug in there just because I thought it looked funky in the meantime, until I picked up an ignition barrel, the proper ignition barrel for that setup. I put a plug in there. So you're going to see, to get that out of there, you can just pry that plastic out, and it's a little funky, I have to admit that. I just picked up a piece of maybe 2-3 inch heater hose that slid into that ignition barrel, so you can pull that little plastic knockout out of there and insert it. I picked up in the bag in the back, that plastic bag in the back, I picked up the correct plug for the back. It's actually the ignition switch. I'll show you that. And this is stuff I've had for a while, but just obviously I've got other priorities that never allowed me to move on. This is the correct Volvo ignition switch for this car. So this actually just mounts to the back. If you crawl under that dash, there's two screws, and the screws are in the bag here. There's two screws in the bag. They're actually flathead screws. There's one here, one here. This will actually just insert into the back of that ignition switch cluster. This is the plug, and whoever did that nifty arrangement on the inside there just cut it, and then they apparently threw this away. But this is the correct switch for this car, so that'll be in the bag as well. This is the remnant. This piece inserts from the inside after you take out that plug, that plastic plug. This will insert in. I'm going to do a two-handed camera thing. You can actually kind of see this little lugged male part here actually will insert into, sorry about the lame ass camera work here. Here, let's do it this way. That actually inserts into that ignition switch, so what you need is the key assembly for the inside. So anyways, all of that stuff is in the bag there. The main issue is a starting issue. I should say a cold starting issue. And this is a throttle body setup for this car. It's got a kind of a conventional old school air cleaner to lift this whole setup off of the throttle body. You'll see underneath here, throttle body with the throttle position switch. But what I'm finding, and I'll show you this in just a second, is cold starts now, and this just developed, of course, recently. What's happening, and this is the cold start valve. It's not an injector per se, it's actually two Phillips head screws here. Back those out, pull this thing out. The nozzle's about that long. It's just a squirter is all it does. So when it's cold start, this hose will pressurize. This feeds right off of the fuel injection rail right to that cold start. I don't think it's, again, it's not an injector per se like these injectors. But when it's cold, this is supposed to inject or squirt a little shot of fuel right into the intake manifold, and it's not doing that. Okay, so this is pressurizing, and your fuel pressure is dialed in properly. I replaced the fuel pressure regulator a couple years ago, and it's adjustable. I'll show you that in a second. But this, I've noticed, is not injecting fuel when it's cold, so you kind of have to prime this thing. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass, but I'll show you that. It'll just save you a little time. What I think, and I haven't diagnosed this yet, is there's coolant temperature switches right on the side of the block here, right on the side of the head, I should say. So I'm guessing one of these, more than likely this one here, I'm guessing, is the one that's gone on the fritz here. So what should happen, from what I understand, is when it's cold, or when the engine hasn't been running a while, the temperature is going to, or the computer is going to sense that, and it's going to tell, the computer will electronically send a signal to this thing, and allow it to open up and squirt some fuel when it's cold. Not doing that, so you kind of got to screw with it a little bit and prime it. So I'll show you that. Other than that, it could probably stand an oil change. Not that it's dirty. It's actually relatively clean, but it's from last season, so that could stand a change. Probably could use new belts. This is probably, no lie, probably an original, not from the factory, but it's a Volvo cloth belt, so it's probably from a dealership way back. And again, I never drove this thing much more than over 6 years I've had it. I drove it maybe 5,000 miles. So the thing with the brakes, I thought it was frozen calipers. It is not, and then I thought maybe it was the master cylinder. It's not that, because that's functioning properly. What I have found, or what I am strongly led to believe, is the proportioning valve, which is right down in here, just a block. This proportioning valve seems to be sticking. It's free now, but I haven't, this season up until recently, I hadn't driven this car. Just kind of brought it out in the spring, and then when I started driving it, just around town here to get it kind of going, and feeling guilty for not having driven it. I found the front brakes were seizing up, and by the time I'd get back to the house, you know, you could tell the front wheels were getting pretty, not like smoking, but I could tell that the calipers were tightening up. So what's happened is, and from what I understand, these proportioning valves, again, sorry about the camera work, proportioning valves can get stuck. They're supposed to meter the pressure and give more pressure to the back, less to the front, so you don't end up with this kind of front skid because you've got all your weight and a larger braking system up front. So anyways, I've freed that up, but I freed it up by working the calipers back and forth, and then I could actually hear this thing release. I could actually hear it kind of fluid squirt back through there, and then the calipers all of a sudden were working freely. So I would suggest you take this thing off. There's two larger nuts here, actually plugs where the line feeds into. There's one on the other side, and it's supposed to be, I've never pulled a proportioning valve apart, but a relatively simple setup with the spring and either a single or a couple little pistons in there that proportion the pressure back toward the back brakes. But you got a little rust on them. Not bad, just the last day or so of rain. But the rotors are okay. Calipers should be okay as well. They could use a rebuild kit. Can't really see in here. Because the boots on the pistons are a little crusty. So the thing that the guy before me did, this is a 75, so it's a smog era car. It had from what I understand, had an air pump on it. I'm not quite sure where, but had an air pump, so you're going to see this rigged up operation here. This is this big lug nut here stuck in this tube was for the pollution control setup for the air pump that either drew exhaust from or injected air into the exhaust manifold. So if you're wondering what the hell that screwy thing is, it was always my intention just to block that off down here and make something a little less detracting, I guess. So other than that, I'll show you how to start this thing when it's cold. And so what you're going to want to do is, again, when it's cold, you're going to want to prime this fuel injection system. And I don't know why that seems to work. And again, this cold start issue seemed to have developed recently. So, and that squirter was working fine back when I was kind of putting everything back together way back. But anyways, what you want to do is prime this thing. So, and by that I mean you're going to turn the key over, not to start, but just to the ignition on, and you will hear, I don't know if the camera will pick up the audible, you will actually hear the fuel pump, which is in the back, energize. So usually what I do is 3 turns of that. Actually it kicked over, kind of wanted to start. Sometimes you'll have to do this, again, depending on the weather. Cold now, it's as the fall is, the summer's coming to a close. The colder it gets, the more you're going to have to kind of monkey with this, or better yet, get the temperature sensor. Again, I don't know if you can hear the fuel pump, but it kicks on for about 2 seconds. You know, this is akin to trying to start a a carbureted car without a choke or depressing the accelerator pedal. I'm guessing one more here. Again, when it's warm, it starts without a problem. It's just when it's cold. I'm guessing one more and she'll catch. So, once she's up and running, if I can get the hood release somewhere. Hood release is this weird horn-shaped deal underneath here. Now it's running fine. And again, that's happened recently. Just since it's, I guess, was operating fine this spring, but since the summer has started to chill off here. And I actually pulled the two little Phillips head on there and pulled that cold start squirter, and I can feel the line pressurized. You can actually feel that feed line from the fuel rail firm up, but there's no fuel being expelled from that squirter, and that's when it's cold. It should toss a little pile of a little quantity of gas in there. So. Being a 6, it's got some, it's not, it's not a V8, but it's got some pretty good torque. Much more than the little 4, the inline 4s. Not that those are underpowered, but... Hands off the wheel, it runs pretty true. No hands on the wheel here. Do that all day, but it's pretty straight, in a straight line. When it's running and when it's idling, it's pretty calm, pretty smooth and quiet. Actually, the fuel pump is louder than the motor, so again, no hands on the wheel. Just going straight down the road, at least until I hit a crown. So, kickdown works. Got really decent acceleration. Not like a V8, but this is a pretty heavy car. But for size and power rating, I don't know what the horsepower rating on the 6 is, but it's easily as decent with acceleration as my 90. I had a 92 turbo 900 series. It was really a nice car. Rode well, but this inline 6 is easily accelerates as good as that car did, the turbo. Not as good on gas as the 4, obviously, but the 164s were a little bit of they were thirsty cars. So again, it rides. I've got the window open here, so. I'll hit the brakes here, so you can see. Don't have a hand on the wheel, so it doesn't pull right or left. Hit the brakes. right or left, even when you kind of jump on them. Brakes are a little stiff, not terrible, but again, I would go through that proportioning valve. I don't know if there's any rubber components in there, but I'm pretty sure it's a simple little valve assembly that's causing any of the grease. But like I said, right now it's not creating any problems, but as I started to free up what I thought were frozen calipers, I determined that it was a proportioning valve that's sticking. So, so take a look underneath. This is the pan gasket, which again is going to be sent to you. Hopefully they send the right one this time. They kept sending the 240 series gasket. This is also an AW transmission, Ace and Warner, kind of an indestructible unit. This does not have overdrive like the 240, but I've tightened. Actually, noticed that a couple of the little pan gasket bolts were slightly loose. I know they're not supposed to be heavy torque, so I just snugged them up actually over on the other side. And now it's several days now, and it's not doesn't seem to be leaking. Regardless, I would swap that pan gasket. I've never changed it. It's probably dry, and I'm guessing that's why those bolts were loose. The gasket's probably shrunk, but it hasn't been leaking. Let's see, I changed it. It's almost a week now, so. And before, this thing would drip quite a bit, and you can see there's wetness here. So driving it, you know, the residue from that pan was kicking back onto this giant monstrous skid plate here, and so forth. So kind of keep an eye on that. But again, I'm having a gasket sent right to you. Hopefully they will send the right one. I don't know, it got a little frustrating. Underneath and in the back by the rear wheel, you will see this kind of screwy arrangement here. I initially, when I saw this, I thought somebody had kind of cobbled together a fuel pump and kind of hung it here. But from all indications, this is where Volvo decided to hang the fuel pump right off the back of the tank here. So there was a different type of strap. From what I've seen, there was a different type of strap here, but whoever put probably wisely put a stainless steel strap. So that is the fuel pump, and that is when you turn the key and you hear it energize, this is the high pressure fuel pump. And that's, if you're wondering what the hell that is, and is that normal, I guess that's the way they did it. So everything in here pretty much works, with a couple of exceptions. As I said, when it's warmed up, it doesn't seem to have any issues starting at all. Starts right up. Again, that's just when it's cold. You gotta prime it like a fool. Otherwise, as I said, I would certainly attend to that temperature sensor. We got your AM radio, AM FM radio, I should say. Single speaker. If you take that out, put it in a different audio system, I would hang on to that radio. It's an actual Volvo unit, and somewhat desirable for people restoring these things. The coolant temperature sensor and the gas gauge, notorious Volvo issues. The tank gauge has never worked for me in the short time I've had this car, or the short time I've driven it. I've had it for 6 years, but and the temperature sensor, or the temperature gauge, works occasionally, so kind of a hassle, but I'm guessing not too difficult to fix. I just frankly haven't spent a ton of time on this car. So temperature works great. Actually, the heater works fantastic. Blower works great, which I think it's very similar to the 240, where the blower is the double-ended blower motor is inside of the ductwork, so it's a major pain in the ass. But this one doesn't show any signs. It's quiet on 1, 2 blows nice, 3 blows powerful. The failing, the sound you hear with the failing 240s, and I think it's the same setup here in the 160. You will hear them squeak. They won't work on 1. This one blows nice and quiet on 1. If they do go, I've changed a couple of them. They are not fun. They are doable. When I say change the blower motor is what I'm talking about. You have to kind of take this cluster apart and kind of dink around it a while, but you shouldn't have any issues with this. This one's super quiet. Clock does not work. It works twice a day, as I jokingly suggest, at 5 o'clock in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. So I've had, when I first got this, a lot of the dash was taken apart. I put it back together. It's an electronic clock, so I toyed with the idea of putting in a quartz movement, but again, that's as far as I got with it. So otherwise, all pretty much here. So under the dash cover, the dash isn't bad. It's got one crack that somebody, I think, tried to mend with, I don't know what they used here, but some rubber product. Common area for the 240s, the 700s, 900s, they all crack. But I got this dash cover for it, and again, there's the your killer audio system, single speaker. So I got this dash cover. It's not too gross, but it helps. It helps so the dash doesn't become more deteriorated. Got the book for the car will be in here, the 164 book with any of the receipts that I had. I've got my receipt map from where I got the car way back in the day, and the card from the original owner, Francis Conway in Missouri. And from what I understand, I think it was a Hispanic guy that I think he died and the car was abandoned. This is just what I was told by the previous owner, who seemed pretty legit. From what I understand, he died. The car was kind of left at a service station for whatever repairs that were done, and never picked up the car. So this guy bought it through the abandoned sheriff's sale, and that was the end of that. So, and again, he was going to use it for, I think, SCCA, kind of vintage car racing, and then decided that a 2-ton Volvo with a giant inline 6 wasn't going to be the perfect choice for him. So, anyways, Ryan, I think I've covered kind of those main things. The main one really is that cold start valve, or that cold start squirter. But again, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm 99% sure it's a temperature sensor that's not sending the right signal to the computer, so it doesn't offer any additional gas into the intake manifold. So anyways, there it is.